Hello, the Pioneer viewers. Today we bring you a development that could change the course of the war. But before that, let's take a step back and look at the dark picture inside Russia. As the war in Ukraine approaches its fourth year, the pressure within the Kremlin is mounting. Western sanctions are suffocating the Russian economy. Losses on the front lines are growing, and public patience is wearing thin. Russia has entered a period in which even its own invincible army has no longer trust in its own shadow. Unease continues among senior Kremlin generals. Ukraine's technology-backed offensives are gradually eroding Russian defense lines piece by piece. Western-supplied tanks, drones, and long-range missiles have completely transformed the nature of warfare. Russia still believes it can win, but in reality, what it's losing is not just territory, but trust. And right at this sensitive moment, an attack struck at the very heart of the war, on the territory Russia once proudly called untouchable, in Crimea. Before we begin our report, a quick reminder. Don't forget to subscribe to our channel and turn on notifications so you won't miss our daily news and analyses. I personally read all your comments, so keep sharing your thoughts with us. Also, let us know in the comments what topics you'd like to see on The Pioneer. And now let's begin. At midnight, a massive explosion echoed throughout the skies over Feodosia. Within seconds, this port city in eastern Crimea turned into a sea of flames. One of Russia's most critical fuel depots was destroyed before the world's eyes. Eyewitnesses said the night sky suddenly turned as bright as day. The shockwave shook houses miles away, and towering flames consumed the massive fuel tanks. By morning, the sky was covered in thick black smoke, and social media flooded with the images the Kremlin fears most. Russia was burning. The Kremlin's first statement was, as always, calm and dismissive. The fire is under control. But the truth could no longer be hidden. The site that was hid was the main supply hub providing fuel for Russia's Black Sea fleet. According to Western analysts, this was one of Ukraine's largest energy operations in recent months. The destroyed fuel depots supplied not only the Russian Navy but also the tanks and armored units on the front lines. In other words, this explosion represents a direct cut to the lifeline of Russian troops. Ukraine has not officially claimed responsibility, but sources close to Kyiv say this is just the beginning. That phrase echoed through Moscow not as a warning, but as a threat, because this was the third major explosion in Crimea. Last week, a fuel terminal in Sevastopol was struck. Before that, an ammunition depot in Zhankoy. Each one has ripped away another piece of Russia's war machine. Experts say these attacks mark a new phase of the war. The targets are no longer just soldiers, but fuel, energy, and logistical arteries. Without fuel, tanks cannot move. Without fuel, ships cannot sail. Without fuel, the war stops. Crimea was once the symbol of Putin's 2014 victory. Now that symbol is turning to ash with every explosion. Once considered an untouchable region of Russia, Crimea is now well within range of Ukraine's drones. And with every strike, the Kremlin's fragility becomes more visible. After the explosion, local authorities in Crimea declared a state of emergency. Russia's defense ministry tried to downplay the scale of the event, but the images spoke for themselves. The flames raged until dawn, and smoke carried by sea winds stretched for miles. Some sources reported that Russian naval fuel tankers were also destroyed. Public outrage on Russian social media is spreading rapidly. Citizens are asking, wasn't Crimea supposed to be safe? State media is trying to cover up the news, but the footage online tells the truth. Moscow can no longer even convince its own people with fabricated stories. On the economic front, the picture is even darker. In the energy sector, sanctions have triggered a painful process, especially for Europe. For years, the European Union depended heavily on Russian oil and gas. Imposing a direct embargo on Moscow was not easy. However, over time, the EU has largely cut off Russian oil imports and began searching for new supply routes to reduce gas dependency. Countries such as the United States, the United Kingdom, and Japan have completely banned Russian oil and imposed a price cap per barrel to limit Moscow's revenues. Heavy restrictions were also introduced in the technology and defense sectors. Western nations halted exports of advanced technology, especially microchips, semiconductors, aircraft parts, and military components to Russia. This move has severely crippled Russia's ability to produce modern weapons. Boeing and Airbus stopped supplying spare parts to Russian airplanes, triggering a major crisis in civil aviation. The destruction of fuel facilities is paralyzing supply chains. Production in industrial zones is slowing down and logistics costs are soaring. The cost of war has reached the dinner tables of ordinary Russians. Prices in supermarkets are rising and power cuts are becoming more frequent. Russia is now fighting a two-front war on the battlefield and in the economy. For Ukraine, however, this attack could mark a turning point. Kyiv is no longer merely defending, it's taking a stronger offensive posture. Ukrainian intelligence has indirectly stated that operations targeting energy centers will continue. Western sources also confirm that such strikes are being carried out in a coordinated and well planned manner. For the Kremlin, this is not just a military loss, it's a psychological breakdown. Putin's government had promised its people security, but today every explosion on Russian soil proves how hollow that promise has become. So, what happens next? How will the Kremlin respond to these attacks? Can Putin shed the image of a leader gradually losing control? And more importantly, will the end of this war be written in the language of energy and fire? One thing is certain, the explosion in Crimea is not just a news story, it's a warning. The war is no longer being fought solely on the battlefield, it's burning through Russia's very lifelines. As the pioneer team, we're following this story closely. They can hide the truth, but they cannot silence it.